Everyone. Today I'm going to be telling you about a study that stems out of my dissertation work. So my dissertation focused on looking at the strategic use of evidence using a psychologically realistic interrogation paradigm. And for the study I'm presenting today, I took videos from my dissertation, so videos of these different interrogations, and showed them to observers to see how different types of evidence presentation methods could affect their culpability assessments of interviewees being interrogated within a psychologically realistic context. So let's start off by talking about the strategic use of evidence, or the SU technique. The SU technique is an interrogation method that involves strategic timing of evidence disclosure. So is evidence presented at the onset of the interrogation versus at the very end of the interrogation, or incrementally throughout the interrogation? And it involves as well the framing of evidence disclosure. So how is the interrogator disclosing the manner in which the interrogator is disclosing evidence to the interviewee? And the idea of SU is to elicit cues to deception, and specifically statement evidence inconsistencies. So interviewee statements that are not consistent with the evidence that the interrogator holds. And we do see that the SU technique is great at eliciting these cues to deception. And it's also great at increasing observers' ability to discern between liars and truth tellers, as a lot of SU research, actually most of the SU research, shows that observers have higher deception detection accuracy rates when interviewees were interrogated using a SU technique compared to early disclosure technique, which represents the traditional accusatorial method of evidence presentation, in which evidence is presented at the onset of an interrogation. However, there are some gaps within the SU literature. Specifically, observers are usually making assessments of interviewees who were who had undergone a mock crime paradigm and who were explicitly told to lie or tell the truth. But there isn't any study that looks at the effect of SU on observers' culpability assessment when interviewees underwent a psychologically realistic interrogation and were not told to lie or tell the truth, but kind of just followed their own instinct on how to navigate the interrogation, with the belief that they were actually in trouble and actually being accused of a transgression for real. We also see a gap in the literature in terms of the effect of different variations of the SU technique on observers' culpability assessments. There's several different ways that you can strategically present evidence within the interrogation context, and not all of those have been examined in terms of how they affect observers' judgments. So that's what I wanted to do with the present study. I wanted to close these gaps. I wanted to replicate the past SU research, but this time using a novel stimuli. Instead of using videos that came out of a mock crime context, I was going to use videos that came out of a psychologically realistic interrogation paradigm context. I also wanted to compare different types of evidence presentation methods against one another in terms of how they affect observers' judgments. And that meant I was going to compare 3 different types of SU against the traditional accusatorial method of early evidence disclosure. So let me briefly tell you about each of these SU variations. SU original, or late disclosure, is where the interrogator presents all of the evidence at the end of the interrogation after they've asked the interviewee questions and had the interviewee give a free recall. And all the evidence gets presented at the end of the interrogation in bulk. Sue confrontation involves the interrogator incrementally presenting evidence throughout the interrogation. And anytime the interviewee makes a statement evidence inconsistency, the interrogator points out that inconsistency. Sue confrontation explain involves the interrogator, again, presenting evidence incrementally throughout the interrogation, pointing out statement evidence inconsistencies. But this time, if the interviewee makes a statement evidence inconsistency, the interrogator will ask the interviewee to explain why they were being inconsistent with the evidence. And we hypothesize that any variation of the Sue technique would outperform early disclosure in terms of the accuracy of observers' judgments and culpability judgments of interviewees in the interrogations that they were watching. So to answer this, I recruited 486 participants from Prolific, and I implemented a mixed design in which I manipulated interviewee culpability. So that's the culpability status of the interviewee in the video that our participants were watching, and evidence disclosure. So the type of evidence disclosure technique the interrogator in the video that our participants were watching used to question the interviewee. And interviewee culpability was within subjects, which meant our participants watched 2 interrogations, one in which the interviewee was guilty, one in which the interviewee was innocent. And evidence disclosure was between subjects. So our participants watched 2 videos, and both videos were of an interrogation that used one of the 4 evidence disclosure methods. And our primary outcome variable was culpability judgment. So we didn't ask participants, do you think the interviewee in this video is lying or telling the truth? We asked them, do you think the interviewee in this video was guilty of cheating or did not cheat? So we were asking them, was the participant innocent or guilty of the transgression for which they were being accused of and questioned about within the interrogation that they were watching? And as I mentioned before, these video stimuli came from the Sue interrogation study that I had previously conducted. It involved equal focus videos of interrogations that followed interviewees' involvement within a modified cheating paradigm. So I modified the original Rusano et al. 2005 cheating paradigm so that I could use it with community members. And I made it usable with community members by changing the penalty from academic dishonesty to a monetary fine. So our participants participants in the original study from which the video stimuli came from believed that they were engaging in a government-funded test for knowledge, and they were either innocent or guilty of cheating, but then they were all accused of having cheated on this test and were told that they could be charged up to $500. And during questioning within these video stimuli, the interrogator presented only true evidence. So everything the interrogator presented actually happened. And the interviewees within these video stimuli did not make any admissions of guilt throughout the interrogation. So participants in our study from Prolific engaged in a video and sound check to make sure they could see and hear what was going on in the interrogation. And they were told a little bit of this backstory about how participants, or about how the interviewees in the videos that they were going to watch were believed that they were actually part of this study examining knowledge, and they believed their accusation of cheating was real and that they were in actual trouble. And participants were also told that all the evidence in the videos that they were going to watch was true, and that in the videos that they were going to watch, there was a 50% chance that the interviewee was guilty and a 50% chance that the interviewee was innocent. And then participants watched the first video of either a guilty or innocent interviewee, and then were asked, did the interviewee cheat or not? So was the interviewee guilty or innocent of the transgression they were being accused of? And then they watched the second video, and again were asked, did the interviewee in the video cheat or not? So what did we find? We did not find what we expected. So as a reminder, we expected the implementation of any of the SUE questioning strategies to increase of the observer's ability to accurately identify whether the interviewee was innocent or guilty, as compared to the use of early evidence disclosure. And we did not find that. There was no significant difference of accuracy of culpability assessments for as a function of evidence presentation method used. That being said, our participants were pretty good at accurately identifying culpability. So if you see across all evidence presentation conditions, our participants were significantly better than chance responding. Additionally, evidence presentation method did not significantly predict correct identifications of guilty interviewees, nor did it significantly predict correct identification of innocent interviewees. However, when we collapse across evidence presentation conditions, we did find that the proportion of participants who correctly identified innocent interviewees exceeded the proportion of participants who were able to correctly identify a guilty interviewee. So overall, we're seeing that participants in our sample were better at correctly classifying an innocent interviewee than they were at correctly classifying a guilty interviewee. So what can we take away from this? Evidence presentation method used during a psychologically realistic interrogation did not influence participants' culpability accuracy. Overall, our participants were good, pretty good. Accuracy rates were above 60%. When it came to accurately identifying whether the interviewee was innocent or guilty. And they were especially good at identifying innocent versus guilty interviewees. And overall, this lack of effective evidence presentation on accuracy of judgments is different than what we see with past SUE research. And this may be a function of the question we asked. So we didn't ask, was the person in this interrogation lying or telling the truth? Instead, we were asking, were they innocent or guilty of the transgression that they were being accused of? So this is potentially a reason that could explain our inconsistency with the SUE literature. And I mean, also, this is the first time that we're testing culpability judgments within the context of a psychologically realistic paradigm. So potentially there is something to the type of paradigm being implemented, but that's definitely a question for future research to address, and for this needs to be essentially replicated, which leads to my discussion of future directions. I would love to replicate these findings with different samples. So we had a limited number of video stimuli. All of our interviewees were South Floridians, so there could be differences by interview sites just across the United States, even in different parts of the world, in different countries. So it'd be great to kind of build up the number of stimuli we have and to see if this use of an interrogation, a realistic interrogation paradigm, kind of affects culpability judgments. It'd also be interesting to look at whether individuals who have been trained in SUE are better at making more accurate culpability judgments than individuals who are not trained in the SUE technique. And I predict that that may be so, especially if we look at a recent meta-analysis that came out looking at cognitive credibility assessments, which showed that individuals who were trained were better at detecting deception as compared to untrained individuals. And lastly, it would be great to test these questions using stimuli that come from different types of science-based interviews. So, these are interviews that are rapport-based, interviews in which productive questions are used instead of unproductive questions. Do different types of science-based interviewing techniques have different impacts on observers' ability to accurately assess interviewee culpability? And with that, I'd like to thank you. And if you have any questions about this research, do not hesitate to email me. I'm so happy to talk about it. And I'd like to thank the National Science Foundation for supporting this work. Thank you.